Hey everybody, I am your host, Joe JDF Foster, and today's video will be on Tales from the Crypt TV series. While the Twilight Zone will be my favorite, the original Twilight Zone, let me specify that specifically, will always be my favorite. This is my second favorite on my list of sci-fi horror genre. And the main reason that is because the Twilight Zone was older, but it focused more on how it did things and didn't just try to scare people or base it on what it already knew, much like this one did. One good thing about this one was that it did focus on the twist endings and the horror to scaring the viewer as much as possible. But it also sometimes had its social commentary on like the Twilight Zone did. Instead of doing like the Outer Limits and Tales from the Dark Side, where it was more about the scare factor. Also, number 3 on my list of things about this is that this was another one where it was a good thing to see stars who hadn't made their big break yet, or if they had made their debut, they were still working their way up big in the business, while others who were already big could be seen in this series as taking a break or making cameos or guest appearances, in my view, is what they would call it. Such as, I'm fairly certain it was one of the Buseys in a later season episode that dealt with marital issues. I know it's a Busey, I just can't remember which one. Also, Bobcat in an episode that's on my favorites list. Patricia Arquette, which is also on my list, and Kimberly Williams Paisley is in one of the later season episodes for a small bit part, though it's a good one in the way she does it. Another example of this is one of the acting families. I'm trying to remember which one it was. There's an episode that deals with two brothers that where one of them scared the other, thinking they killed them, and it resulted in one of them ending up in a very bad situation. It actually activated like a partial paralysis situation in them. Well, later on in years, they decided to do a birthday celebration type deal. The brother decided to get his revenge on him and did this whole big thing where he acted like he diced him open, let him feel pain, pretty much all the triggers, as if he was actually cutting him open alive, even though he was supposed to be dead during this time, and he was trying to prove a point. Well, one of the brothers in this is actually from one of the bigger acting families, and I forget the acting family at the moment, and that's the reason why I say that. But I do recommend that. It's another one of the episodes It's an episode I recommend that I forgot to write down, but it's because I forgot the name of the episode. But now on to some facts about the series. The series ran from 89 to 96, which is 7 seasons in total. And I happen to agree with majority of the viewers. The final season was the worst season overall. And that's because, it's not because Britain took it over, but it's because when they did, They focused on vampires and werewolves basically for the entire season, minus the final episode, and there was nothing really to it. The prior seasons had at least focused on other ideas. You had vampires, you had werewolves, you had the idea of dual identities, you had the idea of the seven deadly sins being looked at in some way, and human nature. This final season was basically one of two things, minus the final episode, and so it bored people very easily. And it wasn't that the writing was bad, it was just the way it was done. Also, from what I can remember and what I could find, 3 movies outside of the TV series. The first, Demon Knight, which features Billy Zane, who a lot of people would remember from his brief stint on Charmed during one of the last few seasons, where he was the teacher who was a demon turned human for a week, who had like a year to live. Then there was the idea of, and he also played Kit Walker in the 90s movie version of the old radio show, The Phantom, which is something else I noticed about the 90s, that they took a lot of what was radio shows from the 30s and 40s and brought them into the 90s as movies and tried to make them big. And the movie The Phantom also featured Catherine Zeta-Jones. But anyways, back to our Tales from the Crypt part. And William Sadler's in this movie as a different character known as Breaker. A man from World War I, if I remember correctly, is when he got, where the idea is the demons are trying to collect 7 keys and bring back the darkness that God spread, that when, for your religious nut, and for your religious types, God said, let there be light. Well, in order to do this, God spread 7 keys across the universe. But when it initially starts and it talks about the darkness that was there, turns out there was something in the darkness, these demons. That when God said, let there be light, in order for humans to have a chance, he spread 7 keys across the universe. And these 7 keys had to be brought together in order for the demons to bring back the darkness. Well, when the keys were first brought back together, there was a problem that arose. The son of a carpenter was said to have brought his blood, said to have dropped his blood in. And in doing so, the demons couldn't grab the keys. Couldn't collect all the keys and therefore couldn't. But over time, blood had to be used. And eventually, those who were in charge of holding the said key to keep the demons from getting all 7 and bringing back the darkness had to refill the blood eventually. Because if the blood goes empty and all 7 keys are collected, the darkness comes back. This one was actually a very good movie, and I highly recommend it. Second film, Bordello of Blood. This one gets a little odd because the opening of it runs as the idea that he started that he was directing a movie, and then it actually goes into the movie. Well, as it does, it turns out a preacher, good man type character, is actually running an underground brothel with a special type, with vampires in there who are feeding off their customers and letting them die. Well, they come across a very special blood type in the movie. That's actually stated by the leader of the vampires, is that the blood type is very special. And now they're trying to stop the vampires from taking over, while at the same time this man's trying to prove his love for this woman who wants nothing to do with him. And it's actually not the preacher who's in love, or the so-called preacher. It's actually a fallen private detective. The third film in the series didn't come out until the early to mid-2000s, and it's a film known as Ritual. There's a lot in this episode that reminded me... There's a lot in this movie that reminded me of an episode from the series with the way it was done. But overall, it is a different idea altogether. In it, a doctor who had some issues moved to an island. I want to say it's Jamaica, Bermuda, something in the Caribbean, though I may be wrong on that. But she moves there and becomes the doctor to one of the richest people, to the rich family there, who's had some issues lately, and they don't know why. Well, through the film, it's revealed that zombie breath is actually used. And for those of you who don't know, zombie breath, though it may have other names, zombie breath is how I was raised, it's how I learned it, is this nice hypnotic state of dust. You put a nice little amount in your hand, and you just blow it in somebody's face, and it puts them in this hypnotic state. Well, while they're in this hypnotic state, you can suggest to them that they do something, and when they come out of it, they'll have no memory of doing it. You could have had them go out, kill somebody. They'll wake up covered in blood and wonder why they're covered in blood, because they will have no idea on what happened, at least according to the stories of it. I have not been able to find zombie breath 100% confirmed as to what its effects are and aren't. But this movie also goes on the idea of what happens when your family doesn't treat the whole family equally, and how it can cause problems. One thing about this series, John Kassir, again, I'm probably mispronouncing the name, is used in all episodes and movies as the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And it was nice in the way it was done, because for the longest time, I didn't realize that it was actually a puppet. I thought it was John actually just wearing a costume. He was able, also with the lines, the way they were written, he was able to read the lines and make it fit with it, and fit nicely, with the exception of Ritual. Ritual, you could not save, no matter what, with that writing, because as good as he was, it was not that good. Okay, now on to my favorite episodes in the series. Number 11 and all through the house. From season 1, episode 2, the main reason I enjoyed this one is because it brings an urban legend into it at the same time. A woman decides to kill her husband. Collect the money, be all happy about it. Well, what makes it sad is she kills him with the daughter in the house. They're talking about how happy they are about this. Well, one thing about it, when it goes through the urban legend part, there's a man who has escaped the sanitarium. He's actually wearing a Santa costume. Well, now this woman has seen this man in the Santa costume moving around outside, and she's come up with a new plan. She's going to frame him for murdering her husband. But the problem is how to make this happen and make it work for her, because she's running into this issue. Number 10 from season 2, episode 7, The Sacrifice. This one features Michael Ironside in it as a man. Okay, anyways, the story for it is an insurance agent decides he wants to be with his client's wife. So he decides to help bump off the guy. Well, they think they're going to live all happily ever after. Fortunately, Michael Ironside's character in this, spoiler alert, shows up and tells them that he's going to kill. That he's going to turn them in. Unless they agree to give him part of the insurance money and the other option, the other part of the deal, he gets to use the wife whenever he wants. Well, the catch to it is how far they're willing to go in order to keep their secret and not have to deal with the cops. Number 9 on the list from season 2, episode 1, Dead Right. This one actually features Demi Moore in it. Okay, give me a second. Sorry, I had a temporary freeze. There for a moment. And like I said, we're on season 2, episode 1, dealing with dealing with an episode that deals with Demi Moore, where she works at this company. Well, she decides to go to this palm reader, who tells her she's going to lose her job and that she'll have a new one by the end of the day, and other things. Well, she thinks that this palm reader is out of her mind because, well, her boss is supposed to be in Tucson on business. She comes back from lunch 5 minutes late. And the moment she does, it turns out the boss actually came back early and he fires her for being late coming back from lunch. Well, then she does end up with a new job. Initially, the woman realizes the reason why she's mad at the palm reader. The palm reader's clock was slow, which puts her behind time-wise in her mind. So it's the palm reader's fault. Well, throughout this, she goes to this palm reader, tells her this is going to happen and that's going to happen. Eventually, it reveals to her that she's going to find this love interest who's going to make her very rich. Only this one focuses on the idea of the sin of greed in the way that it's done. Because the woman is so focused on becoming rich and getting away, and not actually trying to be happy, that she ends up leading to a self-destructive habit. And you watch this episode, you'll see what I mean. Again, like I said, this one features Demi Moore, and it's a good one with her in. Okay, now for episode 8 on my list, season 1, episode 4, and yes, I do realize that a lot of my episodes are from season 1 and 2. But, like I said, season 1, episode 4, Only Cindy. This one features Leah Thompson. Many of you will remember her from the original Back to the Future as Marty's mother. In this one, she's a lady of the night, and who is so vain that she's even teased about it by other women. Talking about how if, as much as she looks into a mirror or a reflective surface, if they could get paid for that, they'd never have to work again. Well, this woman admits that to her, her beauty is her meal ticket. Well, then she comes across this guy. She goes into this pawn shop, and sees this woman who's yelling at this guy over something he's done. Well, this guy offers her this great deal. He can't take the jewelry. He can't take what she's got because it's not a good deal. Because how much he can make off of it isn't a fair price, and what he could give her isn't worth it. Because he doesn't know where she got it from. Well, so he offers her a different deal. He'll give her so much money and a receipt for up to a year to that date in order to make a mold of her face. And the moment, and if at any time during the year she decides she wants the mold back, he'll give it to her. All she has to do is bring in that receipt. Well, Leah thinks she's got this great deal. Only during the episode, while things start out great, they start to go downhill. And she starts to see that there are wrinkles appearing. And the more she tries to get rid of, the more they tend to show. Well, then she remembers there's the ticket. But question is, does time still exist for her? And how far has she let things go before things can be helped? Even before things get dark. Okay, number 7, season 2, episode 18. The Secret. In this one, a boy's family is killed when he's young, and he's dropped off at this orphanage. This orphanage isn't exactly welcoming to him. They're not exactly hateful, but they're not exactly welcoming either. Well, when he's about 10 years old, this family, deciding they want to adopt, decides to come and get him. And they look at the boy, see how nice he is, and they're like, we'll take him. Well, it turns out this family wants this boy for a reason. Because of a long-standing secret that they have. But where things get interesting is that later on down the line, is that while this family has their own secret, it turns out that the boy has his own, and it's a nice one for the way this is set up to have, so that it works. And I highly recommend this one just because of how the secrets work with each other and how the secrets are brought forth. Number 6 from Season 2, Episode 10, The Ventriloquist Dummy. This one, like I said, features Bobcat Goldthwait, who was in Police Academy 2, 3, and 4, as well as being in Unhappily Ever After as the voice of the character of Mr. Floppy. In this episode, this one brings up the idea of the never meet your heroes and takes a dark twist on why. When it starts off, there's this little boy who's watching the act of this guy who he considers to be his hero, who's a ventriloquist. Well, later on that night, there's a fire that breaks out. And in this cabin area, like area that they're staying at, and the entire place burns, destroying. Just burning, and it ends up killing a woman. Well, years later, that little boy has grown into a man who's been trying to become a professional ventriloquist. Well, he finally tracks down his hero and asks him, "Please, come see my show. I'd like your perspective on it and your tips." Well, they go through it. The guy watches him go through this, and it's terrible how bad this act is. Well, at the end of it, he goes to him, and he meets up with him. He asks him what he thinks. He gives him his honest opinion. You didn't know what you were doing. You had no continuity. You had no continuity. You had no act in general. You didn't know what you need to know what you're doing before you go out there. Basically, it's really harsh. Well, with all the alcohol he can smell, Bobcat's character thinks, okay, this guy's just a delusion. This guy is just an old drunk who's picking on someone younger. Well, then we find out the truth on why the ventriloquist dummy actually was such a good act. And this one was really good with the twist it provided in that case. Number 5. Season 1, Episode 1, aka the pilot episode, The Man Who Was Death. With this particular episode, William Sadler actually is the main star in it. When it starts off, you're getting a man who's talking about how people are going to be sorry when the governor calls, and that to give them 2 more minutes, the governor's going to call and stop the execution, and that it's a mistake and all this. Well, after the execution's performed, William Sadler actually talks about how he's been doing this for the longest time, and he thinks it's clean and efficient because of how it works. Also, he's seen the biggest and strongest of men basically drop to their knees crying because of this. Because nobody wants to die, and that nobody wants to go to that chair because they know it's over, and that there's nobody that's going to save them. Well, during the early part of the episode, they reveal the state has banned the electric chair. from being used, as it has been found to be inhumane, which puts him now out of a job. And while he was doing this, he was trying to figure out what he was going to do. Well, he noticed on the news somebody had gotten away with a crime they shouldn't have. This man, Sadler's character goes off, decides, you know what, I'm going to do this, and decides he's going to electrocute the guy to death. Well, then he sees this couple who killed off the man's wife in order for them to be together. So, again, he does a killing spree there. Tyler's character basically goes on this mass electrocution style killing spree in order to get away, in order to punish these people that he sees as guilty. This episode gets interesting because, like I said, it was the first episode and it drew me in because of how it worked. Not because of how it was, not just, ooh, we're going to throw this and that in there, but because it actually had a story to it. Okay, number 4, the four-sided triangle. This was during the early days of Patricia Arquette's acting career. This was way before Stigmata. And it's season 2, episode 9. Well, during this one, a girl who has gotten in a lot of trouble is sentenced to a farm for work. Release style program. Only, unfortunately, you got a hands-on type guy and the wife who gets a little bit jealous and is trying to take on the husband and teach him a lesson in the process. This one gets a little odd in how it works. And the girl, Patricia Arquette's character in this one, you can question the sanity level in her throughout this episode. Number 3, split personality. Season 4, episode 11. This one, a guy meets up with a pair of twins. Well, he decides he wants both of them. So he decides to tell a lie that he's got a twin brother as well, and decides he's going to leave town and have the other brother come to town. Well, then they start realizing, and well, when one brother's gone, the other brother comes to town, and they start going that way. But what happens when the sisters want the brothers together? He wants to have the brothers together. And number 2, Abra-Cadaver. This was the episode I was having trouble remembering earlier, where it has one of the brothers from acting dynasty. Anyways, deal is, one brother has scared the other one, and he's basically become, when they were in med school, and it messed him up medical-wise, where he couldn't go through with it, and he ended up becoming a medical teacher. Well, then, that same brother who couldn't go on to become a doctor or surgeon decides to play a prank on his own brother, and the brother who actually has the messed up arm or body part, limb, is actually played by Beau Bridges. He actually decides to play a prank where he lets his brother where he makes his brother think he's dead. Only, unfortunately, things appear to be going a little further than they were expected. And number 1 on the list, my favorite episode from the Tales from the Crypt is actually from the final season. And that's only because of how it was done. Season 7, episode 13, The Third Pig. Which is basically a retelling of The Three Little Pigs. in a Tales from the Crypt way, season 7 fell so far you couldn't really save it. But the third little pig was a nice way to go about things. It was a nice way to go out on the series. Because in it, it did the nursery rhyme styling. It had the wolf who basically got away with everything. It had the 2 pigs who weren't all that smart, and the third one who was really smart, who sought revenge. It actually worked out really nicely with the way it was done. But again, overall, while Twilight Zone would get an A or an A plus, this one would get an A minus to an A, because again, it would be my second of the sci-fi horror genre, just because of how good it was, in my view. Now, leave me a message in the comments about what your favorite Tales from the Crypt was, movie or comic or episode wise. Also, what you think I should do a future episode on, because like I said, I do actually read these, and I would like to know your answers. So until then, later.